Hello Whisky fans, got something very special with us here today. Is the Kilchoman Feis Ile 2020 release, which is 12-year-old single malt from the Kilchoman distillery on the Isle of Islay. So this has just been released. I've literally received it a couple of days ago. I paid £108 for this, I believe. It's very limited quantities, so pretty much as soon as it went on sale, it was selling out. I've actually seen that the lucky few people that managed to buy one of these bottles, if previous Feis Ile bottlings are anything to go by, you can put these on auction websites and make £200, even £300 I've seen these sell for. And one bottle of a previous Feis release I've seen sell for £400, so I can actually quadruple my money with this one. Obviously all of that is considering that the box is in good condition, assuming that the box has been looked after. And obviously if you do want to flip this bottle and put it on an auction site, the seal has got to be intact. Well, there's only one thing for it now. Hello Whisky fans, so I am quite excited to try this one because normally the Feis Ile bottles are only available if you actually go to the distillery in question and buy them in person at the time of the festival, because they, at least the good ones and the popular ones, sell out quite quickly. So this year you may have heard of something called coronavirus, which has cancelled the Islay festival this year. So a lot of the distilleries on Islay have chosen to take an online approach to make up for what everyone is unable to go and experience. So, as I said, Kilchoman is a distillery on the Isle of Islay, and it's actually a relatively new distillery. It's only been there since 2005, so the fact that they've released a 12-year-old whisky is very impressive. Let's just hope that they've got plenty more in their stores. So Kilchoman, as the majority of distilleries on Islay, they are known for a pretty heavily peated style of whisky in general. The only ones that tend not to be so peaty are the 100% Islay range, which are peated to around half their intensity as their normal releases. And this one here, I'm not 100% sure if this is made using the peated malt from Port Ellen, which tends to be the stronger peated malt, or if it's using all or possibly some of their own barley that they peat on site, which does tend to be milder than the Port Ellen malt from the industrial maltings, which is also on Islay. One thing that I have just noticed about this bottling, which I'm really pleased about, so it's actually purely matured in bourbon casks. It's not single cask, it is a vatting of 11 casks, and I can see from the cask numbers on the back of the bottle, so they've done a very good job of making everything incredibly clear. I don't know if you'll be able to see that there. They've actually listed the cask numbers on the back label there, which is brilliant. And it does say cask type bourbon, so all of those casks you would assume are going to be bourbon casks. What Kilchoman sometimes do is add some sherry matured whisky, 1 or 2 sherry casks in, and I'm not a huge fan of that, to be honest. I love everything that Kilchoman produce, but I do feel that when you have some good bourbon casks and you slip in a little bit of sherry, it does tend to take the edge off, and in my opinion at least, not necessarily in a good way. I do prefer, generally, especially with peated whiskey, a good bourbon maturation. It tends not to get in the way of the distillate, and it doesn't hide anything, and it really accentuates peatiness and the malt as well, the cereal notes, which is always a good thing. So I think it's probably time to get on with the nosing and the tasting. You can probably see from the level of this bottle, after the intro I did sneak away and have a little taste of this just so I'm not going in completely blind. I wouldn't want to do a review based on first impressions. You need to be sure about these things and get your facts straight. So this whiskey is bottled at what I believe is cask strength of 54.2%. And you can see from the colour there that it looks very much like a traditional bourbon matured whiskey. Lovely light pale gold colour. And I've just left a little watch glass on the top of the glass here just to trap the aromas in, just to, well, make the aromas a little bit more intense so everything's a little bit easier to pick out. But bearing in mind that this is cask strength whiskey, that may not have been necessary, but we'll see. So immediately, as with all Kilchoman whiskies, there's no immaturity there at all. Really fine whiskey. Even when they were releasing 5-year-old single malts, there was never any immaturity to anything released from Kilchoman. Not entirely sure how they do it, but even at such a young age, you're getting really mature, high quality stuff. And at 12 years old, essentially, it noses much more like something in the mid-teens, maybe 15 years old. 15, 16. And it's not overly harsh either, despite the high proof. Nosing this fairly close, and I'm getting all of the complexities. I did leave this whiskey to sit in the glass for probably around 20 minutes, maybe even half an hour, so it has had time to breathe, which you would definitely want to do, especially with a high strength whiskey, and especially seeing as I know for a fact that this has only been bottled mere weeks ago, so it's not had any chance to breathe. So immediately on the nose you have got a little bit of that trademark Islay peat, and it's an ashy peat. The peat from Kilchoman does tend to be, I believe the Port Ellen peat is peated to around 50 ppm, which is up there. It's at least as intense as the Ardbeg peat. It's a very different whiskey and a very different peat, because the ppm level is not the only thing that affects things. But it is a heavily peated whiskey, and that is something that I really like. So it's actually not as much smoke on the nose as I was expecting. I would say I did taste a 10-year-old Kilchoman. It was the 10th anniversary special edition, and I was surprised that it retained a lot of the peat that you would normally associate with a younger whiskey. Because when whiskey matures, it generally improves. But also with peated whiskies, you do tend to get a fall off in the peat. It does tend to mellow and not be quite as smoky as it comes on in its years. And the 10-year-old on the 10th anniversary really did retain a lot of the peat. This hasn't necessarily retained as much. Obviously you've got 2, maybe even 3 extra years, because you have to consider that some of these casks, it looks like they were distilled in 2007. So some of the whiskey in here is actually considerably older than 12 years. Obviously you can't put that on the label, it has to be the youngest whiskey. But those extra 2-3 years, the peat has mellowed quite a lot compared to the 10-year-old, I would say. What you are still getting is lovely, sharp, lemony spirit, unmistakable distilled barley notes there. So it's a really well balanced whiskey. Haven't even got around to tasting it yet, but just from the nose you've got so many different flavours and all perfectly balanced. Nothing covers up the rest of the experience. You've got some nice creamy vanilla notes there. And as I said, lots of sharp lemon, even grapefruit. And you have got a little bit of that peated grist there, but like I said, not as much as you might expect from some of the other Kilchoman releases. Definitely not as peaty as the Macabre. So this is, by the way, at full strength still, 54.2%. Let's get on to the tasting. So I'm going to take reasonably small sips of this, because you don't want to overpower your palate. That is exactly as expected. You're getting a beautiful balance of the sharp, clean, pure, lemony spirit with a wonderful ashy peatiness. And the two are exactly 50-50. It's a perfect marriage. They are so well matched. Actually reminds me a little bit of a Laphroaig. The way you have a wonderful sweetness matched with a strong peatiness. But if I was going to compare this to a Laphroaig, this at 12 years old, I would be comparing this to maybe a 16-year-old Laphroaig. Or maybe more. I think again I'm getting slight, maybe grapefruit towards the end of the palate there. Very pleasant. And the finish is a very long one, as you would expect for a quality whiskey like this. Lingers for a very long time with beautiful smokiness and the peated malt. So, a little bit disappointed that the peat is not quite as upfront as I hoped it would be, but that's a minor mark against this whiskey. It's truly very good stuff. Just going to put that aside, and what I've actually done is pre-prepared another glass of whiskey here. This is not the same glass, this is the previous one. This one here I've actually pre-diluted down to 46%, which I believe is what Kilchoman, I'm going to leave it on for a little while, I believe is what Kilchoman would normally bottle their Macabre at. So this is going to be a good example, a good test of how this very special whiskey comes out against probably the normal Kilchoman that I would be looking at buying, the Macabre, which is also made with I believe 100% Port Ellen peated barley. It's one of the, probably apart from the special releases, the Macabre is probably the peatiest of the Kilchomans. It is one of my favourites. So I haven't nosed or tasted this diluted whiskey at all, so let's see what effect that additional water has had. By the way, if you're interested in how I diluted this exactly down to 46%, let me know in the comments and I'll do a video on that. So at 46%, this is still a powerful whiskey. It may have brought out the peat a little bit more, and the peat has changed a little bit. It's not as clean a nose as it was before. You've got some different types of peat, more of a farmy peat, maybe less smoky and more peaty, less dry sort of regular wood smoke and more of a peat smoke now. But still not, it's not a peat bomb. By the way, this whiskey at 54.2%, as it is in the bottle, is perfectly drinkable, neat, and not harsh at all. If you are at all accustomed to your cask strength whiskies, you're going to have no problems at all with this one. I would say it's becoming closer to the Mackay Bay now. Now it's watered down to 46%. I think on the palate, the extra water has highlighted some of the creaminess. Again, I am getting some notes reminiscent of a good Laphroaig now. Maybe the Laphroaig 15 or 16. It's just that mix of a lovely creamy sweetness. Because you have to remember that Laphroaig, for their 10-year-old at least, they only use fresh first fill bourbon casks, which gives Laphroaig that immense sweetness. If you can overcome the peatiness of Laphroaig, it is a very sweet whiskey, and this is too. I think the added water has brought out a little bit of extra saltiness in the finish as well, which is nice. Nice salty oak edge. Gives it even more character. It's a nice tarriness to the nose as well. I think as time goes on, you are getting more of the traditional Islay, sort of iodine, TCP, those medicinal notes that a lot of us associate with Islay. They are coming out more as it breathes in the glass. Yeah, wonderful. I think probably this bottle, depending on my mood, I would be inclined to probably drink about half of it at full strength and maybe the other half add a little bit of water, maybe knock it down to around what I've got there, 46%. That's a good drinking strength. Now, what I have also got here is another third glass of the Kilchoman, and this one has, same bottle, has been diluted exactly down to 40%. So this is sort of the standard strength that you would get in a Lafroig or a Bowmore or Highland Park, you know, those whiskies. I don't necessarily approve of watering whiskey down to 40%, but a lot of companies do it, and just out of interest I have created this one so we can see how it compares at this minimum strength for Scotch. And I don't know if you can see there, but there is a bit of haziness there. That's always a good sign when you dilute whiskey, especially when you give it a little bit of time. Because this is a non-chill filtered whiskey, as all quality whiskey should be, you are seeing that little bit of Scotch mist. If you didn't get that, there's something wrong. Hazy whiskey, when it's cold or when it's diluted to low strength, hazy whiskey is not a problem, it's not a bad thing, it's a sign of quality. So let's see how this compares at 40%. Hope I haven't killed it. Wow. So that first hit from the nose is phenomenal. So late on the nose it descends into a huge mass of ashiness. But it's also opened up a lot of fruity notes on the nose as well. Almost a fruit salad note. So normally I would never dilute whiskey to 40%, and to be honest I try not to buy whiskey that is bottled at 40% because it's just too weak. It's the minimum strength that you're allowed to bottle whiskey in the UK, at least, for a reason, because when you go below 40 bad things happen. It's a watered down experience, but this one at 40% more than holds its own, which is again a credit to this whiskey. Getting lots of sort of confectionery notes on the nose now. Fruity sweets, fruit salad sweets, and a little bit of marshmallow, sugary, very sweet. What you do often get though with whiskies that are watered down to 40%, sometimes they'll smell good, sometimes very nice, but at the low strength, the 40 ABV is not enough to pull off a good palate. Sometimes when you taste them, the palate just is lacking behind the nose because they have watered it down that much. So let's see. Well, the peat is still there, but I think at 40% we are pushing the limits of probably where you should be diluting any whiskey to. It's not the fault of this bottle here. Still quite lovely. Lots of sweet fruitiness, and then you get that peat rushing in towards the end. And again, the finish on this, even diluted down to 40%, still very long, really hangs around. As does, if you get a little drip down the neck of the bottle, if you wipe it off with your sleeve, as I have a habit of doing, that peat smell will stay with you until you wash your clothes. You get excellent value for any peated whiskey that you spill, because the smell just stays. Don't spill it on your carpet. That's your house peated for life. So what I'm going to do is bring back the cask strength, the original glass, at full strength. I don't know why my camera's suddenly gone completely out of focus there. Here we go, we are back. So I've brought the original cask strength one out here, just to have another little look. I did suspect that on the nose, as I found with the other ones, as I was drinking them they had a chance to breathe, you do get a little bit of peat coming out. I do suspect that maybe this one, as you start to get down the bottle, the peat might increase a little bit. Might just be a little muted because it's such a fresh bottle. A little bit of bottle shock going on there. As it opens up and has a chance to breathe, you might get a little bit more of that peatiness. Still not a huge peat bomb, but then at 12 years old, you've got a trade-off. You start off with a heavily peated spirit, and it's the same for any distillery at all. The longer you mature that peated whiskey, the more mellowed and tame that peatiness becomes. And that peat, that big hit of peat in your face right at the start, you're trading that for maturity and complexity. You see it in Laphroaigs, and it's the reason why the cask strength 10-year-old Laphroaig is so popular. You don't really hear anyone raving about the 15 and 18 or even the super old Laphroaigs. You hear people raving about the 10-year-old, the quarter cask, which is even younger than the 10-year-old, and the cask strength because they have that intense peat from the short maturation. And what you're seeing here in a Kilchoman at 12 years old, and it's a very mature 12, is something similar to what you see in an 18 or 21-year-old Longrow or 18-year-old Laphroaig. You are trading that big, intense peat for extra maturity. You would never guess in a blind nosing and tasting that this is only 12 years old. I don't know how Kilchoman manage to mature their whiskey so quickly, but they do seem to get good value out of their years spent in their warehouse. Must be that their casks are very carefully sourced. Getting more and more peat by the minute. Wonderful. Just going to leave that there for a second. One thing I do have to talk about with this whiskey, as I mentioned, this would have normally been only available from the distillery building itself during the Islay Festival, and they've decided to release it online. And when it was originally put up for sale, the website crashed, at least for me, crashed and became completely unavailable and unresponsive the exact minute that this whiskey was put on sale. And that's not a coincidence. You may have experienced it yourself. A lot of these Islay whiskies, because Islay's not the only quality whiskey in Scotland by a long shot, but it is some of the most popular and well known, and it has some of the most fanatical fans. So what you often get with Islay whiskey when a limited release is publicised and goes on sale on their website, the website will crash, and when it comes back everything's sold out. And that's exactly what happened with this one. I know that Kilchoman considered going for a ballot type system to select who would have the opportunity to buy the whiskey, but what they actually did was put the whiskey on sale, it may have been the next day or the day after, on its own dedicated website, which they hoped would cope with the demand. And that's where I managed to buy this one here for £108. And I know that there was a bundle of this one and some tasting packs for the Whisky Festival, and they sold out within 1 minute, 60 seconds of going on sale. And these bottles on their own were also sold out within 5 minutes. So this is a bit of a problem. And it's a problem with all of the Islay distilleries, you have the same problem with the limited edition Lafroigs and especially Ardbegs. Their website will quite frequently go down, and when it comes back, everything is sold out. And there's multiple reasons for this. It's partly because it is very good whiskey, and people are very fanatical about it. But there's also bottle flippers, people that see this whiskey and they know the demand for this whiskey. So this bottle here is one of 2,630, which is not many bottles at all. I've seen even runs as large as 8,000 bottles are sometimes quite often described as limited edition small batch. So there is never going to be anywhere near enough of this to go around everyone that wants it. So what do you do about that? You can put it up for sale and first come first served. A lot of people are going to be disappointed. You could do what Highland Park do and start watering your whiskey down more. So something that used to be at 46 becomes 43%, something that used to be 43% comes down to 40%. And by doing that, the distillers are making their casks go further. They're compensating for the fact that there's not enough to go around by making it go further. So less actual liquor from the cask is in each bottle. You're making up the difference with water. Not in this one, of course, because this is cask strength. Or other than living with low availability, what some distilleries have done is either lower age statements. Old Pulteney in particular have recently replaced their entire lineup with a new lineup, which is still good, but in my opinion not necessarily as good as some of the old bottlings, because the new ones are to a different recipe, different casks, and the age statements are creeping down. Or even worse than that, some distilleries, Glenlivet famously, reasonably recently replaced their 12-year-old with the Founder's Reserve, which is a no age statement whiskey. So with that, they were going from a 12-year-old, very well respected and widely available, widely known 12-year-old, and going to a whiskey which we don't know, because it's not got an age statement, but could be as young as 3 years old. So none of those options are really a good option, are they? What do we do about the fact that more people want Islay whiskey than there is Islay whiskey to go around? I think the best you can really do is a combination of having small runs, so some people are going to be disappointed, and maybe keeping the price up a little bit, not into silly territories. Don't want Kilchoman to go the way of Ardbeg Supernova. What is that, £200 a bottle? For a no-age statement whiskey. It's probably, potentially younger, maybe a lot younger than what we've got here. No one's going to be happy with that, and no one wants lower ABVs. So maybe keep the price up, that's good for the distillery. And yeah, accept that not everyone is going to be able to get a hold of this. But the other thing that we can do, that you can do at home, is end Islay mania. I'm never going to encourage people not to drink Islay Scotch, because it is one of my favourite categories of Scotch. But there are lots of distilleries out there. Annock Distillery, Knockdhu Distillery, that produces Annock whisky, is one that instantly springs to mind, that produces some really nice unpeated whiskey and some phenomenal, not all of them, but a lot of their peated whiskies are phenomenal. Almost in an Islay style, to be honest. So yeah, shop smart, have a look at what else is out there, and if you do get disappointed that you haven't got a bottle of Islay that you wanted, and I know that a lot of people are going to be disappointed with this one, because I don't think they shipped, or I don't think they were able to ship any to the United States this time. So you can just imagine that this sold out in 5 minutes. If the Americans were there buying as well, this would have probably all been, I probably wouldn't have got a bottle. It would have probably been out of stock immediately. But that's besides the point. Because the point is that this is an amazing whiskey. If you've been lucky enough to get one of these yourself, let me know what you think in the comments. What mark do I give this? I've been giving some high marks lately, but this is going to have to be an A-. Whiskies do have to work hard to earn good marks by me, so A- is really in the maybe the top 1%. What would they have to do to improve that score? I'm not really sure, to be honest. I think if this is a very well matured whiskey, but if they somehow manage to find a way to mature this a little bit more, maybe around the 15-16-year-old mark, add a little bit more of those tertiary flavours, which is just my personal preference, I really like, without losing any more of the peatiness. So you're really talking about a wonder whiskey there. But I think even with another 2-3 years, the sort of whiskies that Kilchoman are going to be putting out in 2-3 years' time, they are really going to be in solid A territory. Cheers.